Alright, so first we're going to start with the Arverni. The Arverni are a really nice faction. They were the first Gallic faction when Rome 2 was released, and so I thought it would be a good idea to just go over them first because they didn't have these two units right off the bat. I think they had a different unit. So let's start. The Arverni are my go-to Gallic faction. They are perhaps the most reliable of the Gauls, although I don't use them too much anymore. I probably will use them in the following streams, but for now we're going to just talk about them and see what my thoughts are. So they are your basic Gallic faction, and therefore the standard barbaric faction overall. The Arverni are offensive with good defensive stats. Whenever you're calculating whether or not their melee or spear units can beat an enemy unit, it usually comes down to weapon damage, and all of their melee units can one-hit either a low tier or medium tier unit on the charge. Of course, this is model-wise, not an entire unit. Only shock cavalry are devastating enough to do such damage. They also have a special unit, Gallic Hunters. Gallic Hunters have 150 range, but can deploy anywhere and are great for stealthy kills, especially against good archers or other high targets. They are also the only faction in the base game that have Oathsworn. Every other faction that has it are DLC factions. Their weakness is apparent when you're fighting Rome. In a prolonged fight with no damage done prior to engagements, which is like skirmishing engagements if you don't use your skirmishers to hit their lines, their core unit, Chosen Swordsmen, will lose to Rome's post-Marian core unit, Legionaries, unless you use Shield Wall, which occasionally glitches if you don't have a good charge or if you get charged by cavalry and then infantry. They also lack the flexibility of the Iberians, who have less armor but better melee stats and do not require Shield Wall. Of course, cavalry are less likely to charge you frontally if you have spears there, because pulling out of braced spears hurts cavalry a lot, thanks to the hidden bonus versus rear mechanic. To summarize, the Arverni are most likely the most straightforward barbaric faction in the game. Give them a try. You may or may not like their units and or game plan, but they can do quite well for themselves. In my opinion, the Arverni beat the Seleucids, but they do lose to the Arvaci, which I'll be talking about tomorrow. I'll also be talking about the Seleucids tomorrow. And what does their main army look like? Most people go for Oathsworn generals because they're pretty resilient and they have access to headhunt. Your core usually is Chosen Swordsmen. You may want to throw in one or two naked warriors. If you invest in naked warriors, these guys will lose to cavalry charges. They will lose in prolonged fights faster than Chosen Swordsmen will. Bringing Celtic warriors can be good for meat shield rolls or, combined arms rolls. That's where Celtic warriors are very devastating. When you charge a cavalry unit and then follow up with Celtic warriors. It's a good idea to do that, but if you're using them frontally, use them as meat shields for your main line so that your main line can get in. Chosen Spearmen don't usually have a role, but if you bring them, use them on the flanks. Usually having them in the center is not necessary because Chosen Swordsmen have good melee defense anyway. But this doesn't mean that you can't use them in the center. It's just that I don't recommend it. Missile infantry wise, you have access to Celtic slingers, Celtic youths, and Celtic skirmishers. Usually people don't bring Celtic skirmishers. I do every now and then. Most of the times I'll bring Gallic hunters because of their usefulness. For cavalry, most of the times I go with heavy horse. I tend to bring a minimum of 2 cav units and a maximum of 4 or 5. This is only for non-nomadic factions. With the nomads, you don't have a choice. For special, dogs are the only special units in the game, so I usually don't bring dogs, but if I do, I bring like 1 or 2, and I don't overinvest. And yeah, that's pretty much it for that. Also, Levy Freemen are quite useful. They are arguably the most cost-effective unit in the game because they have precursors, a bonus versus large of 25, and melee defense of 55, making them pretty resilient. Most of your game plan does revolve around chosen swordsmen. However, how you approach your opponent is up to you. You can charge with cavalry, especially the light horse, because they are much cheaper and have better melee defense than heavy horse. You can charge in with them first. As long as the unit isn't like heavy or very heavy, it usually works. If they are heavy or very heavy, heavy horse are better. When it comes to noble horse don't have frenzied charge, but they are very heavy and can be very useful on the flanks if your opponent is trying to take out a unit of yours. So yeah, overall, most of your strategies should revolve around chosen swordsmen. They are your core unit, and they are very good in the right hands. I'm going to take another minute 30 break.